So at this point in time, I would like to start in on the public part of the Technology Committee for today, November 14th. Any members declaring any conflict of interest among the table? Not seeing any. Minutes from the previous meeting, we've already dealt with that previously. Under new business, we have the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. It's item number 1. We have a board report in front of us. I will turn this over to the chief, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report really outlines our request to renew our Microsoft Enterprise Agreement for an additional 3 years at a cost of $616,665 per year over the next 3 years. That would commence as of January 1st, 2020.
Thank you. Questions of board members? I do have some. I'm glad you're moving to Office 360 or 365, whatever name they put on it. Can, in this request here, what is the actual seat, what is the actual, you're asking for 1,043 of these licenses, but then you also talk about other components of this, where I see, a 1 here, a 7 of SQL Server, and et cetera, et cetera. What is the per seat cost of the Office 365?
I'm going to turn to Mr. Ackermascool for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet from Microsoft. I believe the E3 0365 seat cost, and that's one line item, is about $22 a month. But let me just confirm something here. And then there's also other costs, for example, dealing with advanced security threat detection, identity management, to protect the records in the cloud if we decide to go that route. So it's not just one line item that talks about Office 365. There's other pieces in that, but I believe the line item, do you have a spreadsheet?
But embedded in that line item, the E3, and I hear what you're referencing, it secures, you're going to use the cloud services that they're providing. Is that correct?
Correct. If we decide to implement Office through the cloud, we'll be utilizing the Office 365 cloud services instead of an on-prem installation. That's
right.
Correct.
So you're, in the traditional method that you used before with Exchange, you ran your own set of servers here where people stored their records, or their Word documents or Excel spreadsheets, whatever the case may be. In going to this, you're going to make use of a cloud service based in Canada. You confirming that?
So the Microsoft Azure, the Microsoft Cloud, is actually in Canada, and they have a presence in Quebec, one in Toronto and one in Montreal. So it's 100% in Canada. And
they have confirmed that?
It has confirmed through all levels of government, and we have that in writing, absolutely.
Okay. So in buying this E3, which provides all the Office tools as outlined, Outlook is embedded in that as well, correct? Is that where your Exchange server now moves?
So the Office 365 E3 allowed us to have a hybrid installation, meaning we could maintain the data on-prem and utilize the services of the cloud. So instead of just strictly being cloud, we have the option to do on-prem or on the cloud as we deem appropriate and in compliance with security, confidentiality, and the RCMP. So to answer your question is we will make that decision depending on the privacy of the data, because we wanted to make sure, like every other agency, we need to have the hybrid capability to maintain sensitive, privileged records that cannot be put on the cloud until the RCMP allows privileged information to go in the cloud. We can maintain them on-prem, but you utilize the Office 365 installation. So the old way is you had a DVD or a software and you installed everything on-prem. No interface to the cloud. So what I'm saying to you, Chair, is we have the option to do either for the same cost.
So the other question then that opens this one is, you talked about a hybrid solution here, and the ability to sort of segment. Is it up to the user in front of a terminal to determine where it goes, or have you tried to automate that?
Could you repeat that question, sorry, if you don't mind?
The issue that I see here, you talk about a hybrid solution. If I'm dealing with a record, I'm composing something in Word, and it has a criteria that it should be saved locally
Right.
versus going to the cloud.
Right.
Is it up to the individual using the computer, in other words, a staff member in this police service, to make that determination? Or do you have some ability electronically to parse it out and say that goes to the cloud, or no, it stays locally?
No, great question. That is based on the definition of our information management strategy. As we classify the record to be privileged or protected B or highly confidential, this agreement allows us to have that one drive, I call it, to be local, and all other records to be in the cloud. So, for example, in discussion with the RCMP, if the data contained in an email or a Word document may contain privileged, we'll have to maintain it on site, and we can do that. It will not actually be in the cloud. But if the information like a Word document about a gala, it's not privileged, we can maintain that on the cloud, and it's backed up and it's covered in the cloud. It doesn't have to be retained here. So what I'm saying is up to the information management classification policy, the system will determine where it should go. Because you have to classify the record. And I think Mr. Gary Holden mentioned in a previous discussion that we're looking at the classification schedule for every record in the organization and how it should be classified.
So here's another scenario. I'm concerned about data security. I always have been. The scenario that I have here is discussion takes place in the chief's office dealing with an intelligence matter. It comes in as a verbal discussion. Somebody within the chief's office is now tasked to create some sort of a minute from that, which would be normal. That person uses Microsoft Word to create the minutes of that specific minute. That employee then, has to understand how that's going to be classified.
Correct.
Can you assure the board that appropriate training has been done within the service, that they have the tools and the skill set to classify things appropriately? Or do we run the risk of something being inappropriately classified and end up going into the cloud, as much as I believe Microsoft has gone to great efforts to secure that? But if you look at, the true RCMP mandate of data security, it probably should not have gone to the cloud. So how are you going to address that? You said this is automated, but that's based on the fact that the employee at some point in time had to make a determination in his mind whether it's cloud or non-cloud.
No, good question, Chair. So in January 1st, we're not going to go put everything in the cloud. So I just want to assure the board that this is not going to be tomorrow. There's a whole change management that we have to go through. So back to your question, as we develop the classification records for the cloud, and I do have an information governance document about Office 365, as we determine certain records to go to the cloud, we will roll that out very slowly through a managed change management. Back to your question, if we decide to have a document to the chief's office that contains privileged, we will train staff in how to do the proper classification, but we're not expecting to be records managers. We expect the system to say, based on that documentation, you have to classify it a certain way, and it will route it and automate it to go a certain place. Back to your question about the security, is as we develop our Office 365 deployment, it is going to have legal hold, it is going to have identity management to make sure that the document out there is not going to be easily opened by anybody. The recipient have to be authenticated to say, I'm allowed to see that document. So there's a lot of work in the background to do that. So we're not jumping day one. We just have to be very careful of when we do that. But we have to renew the agreement because it does expire on December 31st. in January 1st becomes active and now allows us to move forward with whatever management plan from an information management perspective. So I hope I answered your question, but there will be automation, but we have to rely on the information management strategy and the governance, including training and how we're going to deal with our records. That doesn't, it's not any different for us, whether it's in the cloud or here, it's the same security principles that have to be managed. And I hope that answers the question.
If I can just add as well, in terms of the information strategy for the organization is largely role-based as well. So as an example, our intelligence unit, for example, that type of information would be stored on-prem, and we're not going to have that stored in the cloud just because of, you know, the obvious sensitivities around that. So Gary Holden is very much alive to the various roles within the organization and sensitivities around those confidential documents and whatnot.
Okay, thank you. And some other questions now dealing with the funding component or the cost component of this. Last year, as you referenced, it was about $353,000. So, I mean, we pretty closely doubled this. Several things. I know the Government of Ontario went down a similar route and are on Office 365. I think they started this about four or 5 years ago and are quite mature with the product. Do you have any sense that the seat cost of the 1,043 licenses for that component are we in line with what they're paying? This first of all, it's almost double from last year. It seems awfully high. Now, I know their scale is probably about 35,000 seats, maybe even higher. But are we getting the same sort of leverage as a government agency or an ABC here of what the province is paying for the same sort of contractual piece? I mean, I was seeing costs, my understanding their costs there were below, they were down around $12 a seat.
There's a reason for that. I can explain that. So every government and broader sector agency will get what we call the minimum discount of level D pricing. So that's across all of government Ontario, and I believe in Canada. They call it the level D pricing. There's discounts are offered depending on quantity. So a 35,000 seat may get advantage of an additional 5, 6, 7% discount that are not available to us. Our price, so the per seat right now for Office 365 is $22.50 per month. This is based on the pricing we have from Microsoft. Comparably to the region who probably has an additional, I'd say double our authorized strength or 4 times, are around the same price. The fact we're benefiting from a direct relationship with Microsoft, which is new to the provincial government and broader sector, we're getting an additional 4% discount, up to 4% discount. But the reason that we're not going to get a much deeper discount like other agencies is when we renewed the agreement 3 years ago, we dropped what we call the software assurance from the Microsoft because we knew we're not going to be upgrading to a higher version back then, and that saved the board about $115,000 a year. So it was a conscious decision, knowing that we weren't going to ask the board for additional benefits that we were not going to utilize, and also being fiscally responsible. The fact we didn't have SA, or software assurance, doesn't give us a benefit of a much deeper discount, because we kind of have to substitute for that in the new agreement. So that's the reason why we wouldn't compare to an RCMP or an OPP or the MGS, or Ministry of Government Services, because their volumes are huge. So 35,000 seats is different from 1,100 seats. So, but definitely, with the level D pricing is across the board, everybody gets it, and then you negotiate your discount deeper based on your volume.
Okay, thank you. My last sort of comment on this, because I don't see it in here, and it wouldn't be in here. What is our exposure cost-wise to some of the other providers? And I'll use Adobe, which supplies. I know the reader component is free, but I know you also have full licensing for other Adobe products. That's not in this agreement. Is that something that's coming to us? And do you have any sense as to what the cost of that is?
Yeah, so Adobe a couple of years ago moved from a per seat or an on-prem license to a subscription-based. So as I noted in the report, a lot of vendors and service providers are going to a subscription-based. So Adobe moved. Our price, we have to now pay monthly because we bought it once and maintained it as long as we needed to without an upgrade, if we didn't have to upgrade. Now, I think I budget about $50,000 in the operating budget to accommodate the subscription-based, and we only pay as we need to upgrade. So
Yeah, you're only paying for that for the users that are actually using the full subscription.
only if they request for an upgrade, because if they request for an upgrade, we have to now go and use the subscription model because we cannot get it on perpetual license because it's not available anymore.
No, I'm aware of that. So, I
Yes.
mean, if somebody needs to use Photoshop or one of those products, yes, they have to buy the subscription, and they're paying for that on a monthly basis. But I would also contend that 1,043 people are not involved in Photoshopping.
No, so the advanced tools for Adobe are for forensics unit, for Intel, for potentially crime analysts that require the advanced features. But everybody has Reader, and we just maintain the Reader version is free to make sure that we comply with reading documents from the ministry. Because we have to just keep up with the ministry as we use provincial forms. But our volume for the specialized units, especially forensics, we have to go to the subscription model. And we can count them 10, 15, 20, so it's not a major impact, but we have to
That's
go
what
that
I
route.
was getting at.
Yeah,
I just
that's
didn't want to
correct.
see another, one of these reports at $600,000 for everything that Adobe makes, and one person is using Photoshop to prepare something for a court submission or a Crown Attorney submission.
But, Mr. Chair, we evaluate and request by request, and we give them a lower tool if we think we can meet their operation needs, but we do that in full consultation with the operation unit, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from other board members on this matter? Vice Chair Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you to staff. So in going into the cloud with a lot of our information now, obviously, as you stated, some stay on site. As we move forward into the future, does that mean that we don't have to replace some of our computerization because it's now in the cloud and we don't have to have the machines here to store that? So moving forward, there could be a savings to us?
It could be saving from a staffing perspective, so there's still management at the back end to make sure that you manage the software, but you don't have to go physically to each desk and upgrade physically each one. So there are some staffing efficiencies, and we also stay up to date versus running behind. So there are some efficiencies, but there's a little bit of a management back end and how you make sure that the software is licensed, subscribed, and how you actually unsubscribe, for the lack of a better word. So there's still a back end side, but a lot more efficient. And I know in discussion with the universities, colleges, and school boards, it simplified their management at least by 30–40%. They don't have to worry about, especially with schools, the students come and go at the high volumes. It simplifies their work. We're meeting with a police agency who's gone 100% email exchange office to the cloud, and they're just a neighboring agency in Guelph. We're just trying to go and understand how they're doing it, but it's still a bit of a management. But it doesn't take the work away, it simplifies it.
No, and I understand that. 5 years ago, I moved my business from everything was based in my office, where now I'm in the cloud, so I can be anywhere and get on my system, my operating system. But what I saw savings as moving forward, my main computer, which was around $15,000 to $20,000, I don't need that anymore. So there's a savings to me. I only have to buy smaller computers for everybody to do their work at their desks. But we can be anywhere in the world, basically, and get onto our system. So, but that's where I was asking, because I saw efficiencies on the equipment side of things, although I didn't get rid of anybody, because a little bit different in what I do than you guys, obviously. But again, it was a big savings about every 5 to 7 years when I'm replacing that main computer of about, quite a bit of money. So
No, correct. And just to add that to your point, is if you look at the deputies, for example, they have mobile devices or tablets. Today we can't, because you have to have a Windows-based PCs. That solution allows us to distribute that installation to be on iPhone, Android, iPads, And so now you're accessible to to the organization without having to be restricted to expensive hardware.
Yeah, so, okay, good, thank you.
So I need a mover and seconder to approve the 616,665, which is going to be for a contract for a 3-year period, moved by member Gale, seconded by member Eek. Any further discussion on the matter? Show of hands, please. So this item is passed unanimously as well. Moving on to item number 2. This is approve a purchase for the CF 33 Toughbook tablets directly from Panasonic. We are purchasing, how many of these are we purchasing? 158 and 10 spares. Mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by member Eeks, seconded by member Gibson. Discussion, please, on this item. Curiosity, Van, for you, Chief, on this one. We obviously are using these Toughbooks now in the cars, that's my understanding. Is it a complete wholesale, all the ones that are in there all at once replaced? And are any of them, quote, salvageable as additional spares, or what's your strategy on
that? So as noted, those machines are still working, but they're about 7 to 8 years old. They can be, if we choose to sell them to other police services or other agencies. What we've been using them, we've been using their hard drives, because we got to take the hard drives out, and we've actually been shredding them, not selling them with the hard drives. So we can sell the shell and the MDT, but people have to go and buy hard drives. And it's just a decision we made because a lot of it has data on it that we want to make sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands, MDT, CAD data, and RMS data. So back to your question, if we wanted to sell them and offer them at whatever price, they can be. But we've done that to some, other agencies, but usually we sell them without the hard drive.
Yeah, and so I would assume there, as much as there are assets, the disposal of them, less the hard drive, is done by the region of Niagara on our behalf. Is that correct?
Right, so we put them, and then I believe they collect them, and they take them to the recycling plant, and they shred them or recycle them that way, but without the hard drive.
So the hard drives, just out of curiosity, because I ran a very successful program in the Ontario government, you take them out, and what did you do with them?
We wipe them. We have software that is OPP, RCMP approved, and we wipe the data from them, and we either shred them or we repurpose them to other units for disclosure. So instead of them having to go to Best Buy or buy drives, we give it to them. Yeah.
That's fine, thank you. So we have a mover and seconder on this. Show of hands in favor of this. Thank you. So that's item number 2 dealt with. Item number 3 deals with the IT backup data center outlined in the financial consideration sections, blah, blah, blah. This is an expenditure of $312,000. I need this is the one that's jointly with the region, if I recall. I need a mover and seconder, moved by member Gale, seconded by Vice Chair Steele. Discussion on the backup. I turn it to the chief then.
Thank you. This is really just an extension of what came to the board back in September with regards to our partnership with the region of locating our IT backup center at the region's headquarters, and these are the required computing infrastructure upgrades that are required to facilitate that.
So, questions by members? Member Eek.
Thank you. That IT backup building, is that the building that was built south of the Niagara region out in the parking lot?
Sort of faces Brock University?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that's where it is, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Just out of, we had another backup data center in downtown St. Catharines, which will remain nameless. Was any of that equipment moved there, or are we still maintaining that one as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we moved everything that doesn't have to be there. including the enterprise storage server. We actually relocated it into the regional data center because of some of the challenges we've had in the old facility. So anything that doesn't have to be there. So the only thing in there is the network switches that connects that building back here, and the other public safety equipment are still there, but nothing that doesn't have to be there is there. For example, like radio stuff,
You're
equipment is
still
still
going to
there.
maintain that that facility in St. Catharines then, as well as the region, is that correct?
So you're talking about the one across from Mountain James? No, that one, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I was thinking about one district. That one has been decommissioned when we moved in here.
Okay, fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we have a mover and seconder for this report. Show of hands in favor. Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is to approve a multi-lease award for the multifunction devices, which I guess could be better termed as printer, fax, scan machines. I would need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor, please. Moved by Vice Chair Steele, seconded by Member Gibson. Chief?
I'll turn to Akram for that. I don't have that report here in front of me.
Yeah, so I think it came in as a supplement, as an updated agenda through Deb. I believe that report.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
circulated yesterday.
Correct, yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair, the current contract we have, and we've been working with the procurement and the region, is at the 7-year mark, and it cannot be extended. The renewal of this contract, and now is we have to replace the equipment because we can't continue paying the old vendor or the old supplier. This is really piggybacking and using the Ministry of Government Services, the Ministry of Ontario vendor of record, which is RICO. And RICO has, as I named, as under KeyFax, the contract number for managed print services. It just was seeking authorization to now enter into a new contract with the ministry's vendor of record, RICO, for the next 5 years. This is consistent and or what the region is doing and or have done already. My understanding, the legal contract that the region was reviewing has been finalized and it's just being signed through the CIO or, with the report to ELT, I'm sorry, CLT, Corporate Leadership Team at the region. But the contract we have today is ending in January 31st, the RRP, and we cannot renew it because it doesn't meet the procurement conditions as from the initial RFP.
Okay, thank you. Member DeAngelo.
To you, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Was this just single source through the ministry's approved listing, or were there other companies approached for a quote, or were they able to give a quote? Or is it beyond their scope? Just a few questions, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so this contract is through the ministry, and RICO is the only named approved vendor for that contract. The region didn't want to issue a tender. The fact that the MGS, or the Ministry of Government Services contract, is available, that allowed them to utilize an approved government contract for the purpose of doing that. So the region didn't issue an RFP, nor that we did, because we've always used the relationship we had by putting our RFP needs in the regional procurement.
Well, I'm just, to me, that's a little disappointing because we have local vendors that could possibly provide this, and that means they don't get an opportunity to bid on this. So the only time you go, so unless you get on this list across Ontario, then really that's the only person that's going to, RICO's the only one that's going to get business across Ontario. I don't know if our local vendors could have provided the service. I don't know if that's too big for them or too small. But like I said, I would have liked to have seen at least the opportunity for them to bid if they were able to do so. So it doesn't seem like they did. Thanks.
Just to clarify this, then, the board report that we're dealing with today went through the regional's procurement department. Am I correct in that?
Through you, Mr. They haven't seen my report. I've consulted with Laura from a procurement bylaw, and the bylaw, and Laura can speak to it, allows us to follow a cooperative if they've been named, or a government sanctioned vendor of record. The bylaw allows us to use that procurement method without an RFP, but I don't know if I'm wording that correctly. And the region's decision-making through their procurement bylaw and the legal consultation validated they could do that. So we followed what the regional direction that was aligned with the police's purchasing bylaw, and in consultation with Laura and from a QM perspective, allows us to utilize an existing contract or piggyback it as a government contract. Now,
So a follow-up, just a second, just a follow-up to that then. Is the region signing on to this as well?
and speaking to the region yesterday, they are going to their corporate leadership team to advise them as supported by legal and the procurement or purchasing department. That's what they're doing, and they've done the legal review of the contract already.
So in the previous contract we had was with a company called 4 Office Automation. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're locally based, or were locally based, at least between Hamilton and us in that area?
Yes, so that initial award went through a competitive process, through an RFP, and that's how they were awarded. They were also named in the Ontario Education Cooperative as well, and they are based out of Burlington.
So I know we do a cooperative on the car purchases among police services. And you referenced the cooperative again. Is this then a cooperative from a police? I know MGS, Ministry of Government Services of Ontario, is the one that's gone out and formulated this agreement. But has a, quote, police cooperative addressed the needs of these multifunctional devices and are part of that? Or are you going strictly what MGS wanted or recommended?
No, we're going with MGS. A lot of police agencies who've had previous contract have transitioned or transitioning to the MGS vendor record. We know some of them are close police agencies. So it's just it's a decision that you could use the vendor record named in the contract, or the agency could decide to do something else. But in consultation with the region, we just followed what the region went through, and we didn't tender for it. Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we've done a comparable pricing in capital lease and print between the current one and the vendor record, and they came cheaper.
I hear what Member D'Angelo commented about, some of the local agencies being eliminated from this. Because, I know what MGS looks for, somebody who can deliver services from Kenora to Ottawa to Windsor and everything in between. But you are telling me in your response back to us that the region of Niagara is buying into this, 100%.
Yeah, my understanding is they've gone with that decision. That's a decision that procurement made in consultation with legal, and they were writing a report to CLT. But I'm not sure that report went to the corporate leadership management team, but they're going through that. So I know that they've gone with RICO, which is the ministry.
Okay, thank you. Member Eek, I think you had a follow-up there.
Yes, I'll say it first off. I know very little about the IT. I'm just listening to the conversation and the discussion, and it sounds like, Akram, that the recommendation here is to go with RICO, and that I hear that was a single source, single bid? Yes? The government.
Buying into an existing government vendor of record, of which the Ontario government has gone out for bids and has found a company called RICO. And in our case, we're basically piggybacking onto that agreement.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. The second point is, you've acknowledged that the region is also following in the same vein to go with this company. And I guess my question might be, is there economies of scale that we, together with the region, go collectively? It sounds to me, like, listening to the conversation, that they're separate.
I'd like to answer one question, so Chief, if I may. So to go back to the question about competitive, the government went through a lengthy competitive process, an RFP process, and that's a selection. RICO was the awarded vendor. So there has been a competitive process for that. Go back to the question, the pricing that you have is consistent across everybody. What you may not pay, you may pay different, is if you decide to go outside of the vendor of record, I'll call it professional services or software services, that is negotiated based on another price. But the cost for lease, the cost per copy, whether it's black and white, is the same price across any deployment. So the economies of scale are the same with respect to those core services. And that's what this contract will benefit from, those economies of scale that is already been negotiated at a much higher volume, which is the ministry or the governor of Ontario.
So we are capitalizing on a larger, based on the,
That is correct.
okay,
And I
appreciate that. And that was my concern, that we should be able to piggyback somewhere and to achieve the incentives that we would like to see.
Done with the working with finance, and I know with one of the financial analysts, Curtis, is we looked at the current price we pay. We looked at what the Ontario education pricing is and the government and the capital, and the government was a lot cheaper in the capital because they're pricing based on the provincial volume.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair, just one other question. This is a 5-year term contract. And again, I know little about the IT, but I do know that the technology changes. And when sometimes you hear about equipment lasting for 5 years, it's quite outdated. Is that, I guess my question is, are we buying into a term that's wise for the type of equipment? Or are we falling off perhaps to pick up improvements in the future with a shorter term equipment lease?
Very good question. A lot of the hardware is software driven. It's no longer, it's not as much rely on the hardware. The hardware is just a shell. It's a software at the back end that is upgradable, that allows a higher processing times and a lot more efficiency. So a lot of those machines are now intelligent machines. They're no longer the old traditional one. So I can see with some confidence that as software gets developed, those machines are upgradable. But we know today, comparable to 7 years ago, the processing time is probably improved by 80%. So the software drives a lot of the efficiencies.
Okay, not seeing any additional questions on the matter. We have a mover and seconder already for this one. I just need to show, sorry. Member
Mr.
D'Angelo?
Just for some assurances here, through you, if I could ask Mr. O'Scool, did the region actually look at other prices? Like, did they determine this to be the best price? Because you said they're going along the same route. Have they looked at other prices of I'm going to say local vendors that they weren't able to compete with this? Would you be able to answer that question? I don't know if you have that answer.
I cannot answer the question. I cannot speak to it. I didn't ask specifically. I've trusted the judgment from procurement and legal, but I didn't ask a specific question. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Show of hand. Sorry, Chief?
If I could just clarify that, just from our perspective, though, this model is cheaper than what we were previously paying with the previous vendor.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. My issue is, did anyone else bid on it? Because someone else could have given you a cheaper price compared, potentially. I don't have that answer. That's my question.
Okay. Show of hands in favor of this going through. Anyone opposed? One member opposed, should be noted. Didn't pass. No, I did not call for recorded vote. Okay, thank you. We are up to now, we're going to move into a confidential item, so I would, sorry, new business?
Chair, I'd like to suggest that, I know your tenure on this board comes up next year, and you've been vital for IT, because you know that. That's your baby on this stuff. Maybe ACRIM, with the chief's permission, should sit down with some of us. I'd enjoy a refresher course, because we're not as astute as you on IT. But so you can just give us the fundamentals, because some of the questions that Member Eakes asked, and Member D'Angelo about the tendering process and that. I'd like for him to provide himself if, and I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm saying in the next couple of months, that we could sit down with you being there too, so you can tell us the ins and outs and advise some of these people on what goes on. That's my suggestion, but I think it's valid, because we're lost on a lot of this stuff. You're our brains in this, so.